just watched a video leaked to The Guardian from Kent County Council, which is one of 10 councils currently run by the Reform Party. And in it, the council chair, Linden Kemkaren, she can't seem to hold a meeting without throwing out profanity at her colleagues. And I quote, she used the terms like an effing suck it up. Now, why does this matter? They're just councillors. Why does it matter? It matters because Kent County Council has been held up by Reform as the template for how they would govern. So, if these people can't even get on with themselves, how are they going to run a country? Now, what Reform might respond is, well, you get infighting in all the parties. There's certainly infighting with Labour. There's certainly infighting with the Conservative Party. So they might argue, why single Reform out? This is the line that Farage has taken before. You know, when racist councillors have been exposed, he said, well, there's racist Tory councillors. But it's relevant because Reform keeps bigging themselves up to be the next government. I actually think both the Reform Party and the Greens are getting too much attention, considering that both parties, electorally speaking, remain relatively minor parties. Between them, they don't even have 10 seats. And yet they're both being treated like they're major political parties. And if it could happen, you know, it may well be that there is a political earthquake and Reform will sweep the board and be the next government. And it may happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So a lot of this really is speculation. Pollsters can get it wrong. And I think the more that people see of Reform infighting, they will lose support. It may be that Reform has kind of went through a honeymoon period because of genuine frustration with Starmer and the Labour Party and disillusionment with the Tories, but people will start seeing Reform as not really a party that can govern. My own concerns about Reform, before I get a little bit into the BBC report on this, and I'll put a link to the video itself, I haven't shied away from my concerns about Reform, definitely in foreign policy. Their willingness to defend Putinism and Kremlin propaganda I find deeply concerning. And it's not good enough that Farage says, I don't like Putin as a person and I don't agree with what he's done. They keep pushing Kremlin propaganda about NATO's expansion being the cause of the invasion of Ukraine. Ironically, this is in keeping with the far left. I would argue the far left and the far right have a lot in common when it comes to defending Russia. And yet that narrative of NATO expansion has been debunked. The truth is, Russian aggression in Ukraine is much more to do with Putin's irredentism. The fact that he saw the collapse of the Soviet Union as, in his words, the biggest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century. I do not trust any politician that is willing to repeat Kremlin propaganda. I don't care if they put the caveat that they don't like Putin or they condemn the invasion of Ukraine. If you repeat Kremlin propaganda, then what are you playing at? This situation with Nathan Gill, the former Welsh Reform leader, you know, Farage and Tyson and so on claim they've never met him and they don't know the guy. Yet numerous photographs showing them together would contradict that. There's other areas of foreign policy I don't trust. Reform will be absolutely biased to Israel. I am very critical of what Israel's been doing, as if that isn't, you know, I haven't made any secret of that. Reform's attitude to the Palestinian people needs to be scrutinised a lot more. You know, would they be truly a diplomatic party that would seek a genuine peace in the region, or would they just be another right-wing party that is absolutely biased towards Israel? That needs to be scrutinised. One of the things that concern me most of all is the fact that Farage and his party really want a kind of MAGA-esque UK style of politics. They're also hypocrites, incidentally, because Farage has himself been threatened, and the Afghan migrant who threatened him has got a 5-year prison sentence. In the Commons, Keir Starmer and other leaders condemned that. Condemned the man who threatened Farage. As Starmer put it, you know, we condemn the threats against a member for Clacton. So they were very clear about that. Reform has absurdly claimed that Labour has provoked the violence against Farage. But this is relevant because Reform like to hold themselves up as a party of free speech. Now, Farage says there are limits on free speech because he himself has been the victim of violence, or attempted violence. And yet the same party host Lucy Connolly to be a poster girl for free speech. This is a woman who, by her own admission, was convicted of inciting violence. Now, whatever you think of that case, and I do feel that the prison sentence was a little harsh, but regardless, that's what she was convicted of. This is sheer hypocrisy. On one hand, Farage and his party are saying there's limits to free speech because I was threatened and the Afghan migrant who threatened me should be jailed. And yet they're defending Lucy Connolly, a woman who is inciting violence on her social media account. So why is it okay when someone who the right courts is inciting violence, yet a migrant criminal is inciting violence? It's either you're against inciting violence or you're not. I don't see how you can cherry pick it on whether or not you are the victim of it. It's just... So yeah, I think Reform's hypocritical on free speech, a bit like their MAGA buddies. Reform has nothing to say about the crackdown on free speech in the United States. But that is one of my biggest concerns about Reform, the coziness with the MAGA movement. Now, it's true that Starmer has got quite a close relationship with Trump, but that I genuinely think that's more for diplomatic reasons. I mean, you could argue it's misplaced diplomacy. You could argue that Starmer's too pandering to Trump, and I think on some level he is, but I don't think it's from any genuine ideological affection. I think it's just Starmer thinks it's necessary. In the case of Farage and his party, they genuinely like the MAGA movement. They want to be MAGA-esque. So that's I do not want the future of this country to be even closer to the likes of Elon Musk and Trumpism. Farage isn't stupid, that's why he's kept Tommy Robinson out of his party. That's why Farage is careful not to align himself with Tommy Robinson. But you're going to find that there is overlap among the supporters, without question. And on this point about racism and the far right that the Prime Minister's been attacked for raising, I don't think that Nigel Farage is necessarily personally racist. And I don't think that Reform voters are necessarily racist. But unquestionably, Reform attracts racists. There's no question about it. And I think that the right need to stop denying that there's a problem in this country. We have an issue with small boats. We have an issue with managing immigration. Those are very, very important issues. But I will never accept that it is legitimate to terrorise minorities under the guise of concern over the small boats. I will never accept it's okay to threaten to burn down hotels with people inside. And the right need to stop pretending that the far right don't exist. Recently there was a terror cell exposed and uncovered. They were neo-Nazis who were planning an attack. Thankfully, the security services got to them in time, but they were planning a violent attack against mosques and synagogues. Now, that's not the sort of people that Reform would have as their councillors. They're not stupid. They're not going to have neo-Nazis as their councillors. But I would suggest that Reform people would deny that that is a problem. They would suggest that there's no far-right problem in this country. It's all exaggerated to smear people who are concerned about immigration. Anyway, back to this thing about Kent County Council. I'll put a link to the thing. I was going to read out the BBC article, but I'll do an abridged version, just because I'm trying to condense videos a little bit more where I can. Reform UK has suspended 4 councillors following the leak of a video for a heated virtual council meeting. The councillors sit on Kent County Council, one of 10 local authorities run by Reform UK and seen by the party as a test case of its ability to govern. I assume that's because Kent's a big county. It's about 1.5 million people, actually 1.7 million now, I think. So it's a big council. It comes after a clip was leaked to The Guardian of KCC leader Linden Kemkaren swearing and telling party members to suck it up. She actually said effing suck it up regarding her decisions. When asked by BBC Radio Kent if the suspensions were linked to the video, she declined to comment. It is business as usual at Kent County Council, she said. A Reform UK spokesperson said Paul Thomas, Oliver Bradshaw, Bill Barrett and Maxine Fothergill have had the whip suspended pending an investigation. They added the suspensions were a result of evidence the councillors brought the party into disrepute. Well, why hasn't she been sacked? You know, is it professional for a council leader to be coming out with profanities against her colleagues publicly? I mean, that creates a toxic environment. That sort of disrespect. Frankly, if I was a Reform member and looking at that, I'd be thinking this is the sort of petty tyrants that we have running our councils. I mean, she said she's not a dictator, but then she's shouting down her colleagues. You know, what she should have said was, I've been democratically elected, please respect my position, not effing suck it up. That just lacks professionalism, and it demonstrates what the Reform Party really are. I just don't think these people are fit to govern. So I will put a link to the video. Again, there'll be a lot of whataboutery going on. People will say, oh, what about Labour councillors? What about Tory councillors? But they're much bigger parties, really. And I think that we need to be very careful about the elevation of both Reform and the Greens. Again, the Greens, Polanski keeps talking about the rise in membership. But a rise in membership isn't necessarily the same as seat allocation. It's not necessarily the same as that could be anything. It could just be interest in the party. It could be activists who want to be more involved, but that doesn't necessarily translate as public sentiments. Because remember, Jeremy Corbyn boasted of huge numbers during his watch as the Labour Party leader, and yet he lost 2 general elections. So I personally think both Reform and the Greens are getting a disproportionate amount of coverage. The Tories are in a bad way, but they're not entirely gone. I think really the party that there should be more focus on is the Liberal Democrats, because they have went from being really hammered in the 2015 general election to now having 72 MPs, which is the most they've ever had. Obviously, they're not going to form the next government, but if Reform's success is being exaggerated, we may find the Lib Dems do better than expected. So rather than going from 72 to 78 seats, they may go up significantly higher. I don't know. Maybe not. But either way, the Liberal Democrats can't be totally dismissed. They're not going to form the next government, but, you know, I reckon, perhaps this is speculation on my part, but let's say 2 general elections from now, the Liberal Democrats might just do enough to be the official opposition. And then from there, who knows? So it could well be. I'm going to throw out a speculation here. Based on the current trajectory, and this is assuming Labour and the Tories get really lose support. On the current trajectory, I think the Liberal Democrats could be in a position to form a government in 15 years. You know, and it might even be less than that, because strange things are happening in politics, and people who cannot stand the idea of a Farage government and who want to vote for a centre-left party but are frustrated with Labour and don't entirely trust the Greens, the obvious choice is the Liberal Democrats. If you're in Scotland, perhaps the SNP, but again, the SNP has had a lot of infighting. And they're a single issue party. It's independence, independence, independence. Reform's a single issue party. It's immigration. And the Greens are a single issue party. It's environment. The Liberal Democrats are not a single issue party. That's where they stand out. Anyway, I'll put a link to the video and people can make up their own mind. But people might accuse me of cherry picking, and they might say you could find examples of this in the other parties. It wasn't long ago. The Labour, I'm hearing fireworks out there, it's a bit early. You know, we had a Labour MP assault someone in the northwest. I forget off the top of my head the constituency. That was a disgrace, and, you know, I think he got a suspended sentence for that. So none of the parties are squeaky clean when it comes to bad behaviour from elected representatives. But the point about this is Kent County Council is meant to be the template. And Linden Kemkaren can't even chair a council meeting without throwing out profanity at her colleagues. You know, why didn't she resign? Why wasn't she made to resign? I imagine those who have been fired are going to kick up a stink. So, you know, there's a lot of dissatisfaction in Reform Party ranks for all their boasting about growth and popularity. Now, what's going to happen with those dissatisfied Reform Party members? Are they going to go out and form another party or what? I'll put a link to the video and the BBC report.